The world ended in a sputter. One moment, the old station wagon was humming along the forgotten coastal road, its headlights cutting twin beams through the thickening twilight. The next, a violent cough from the engine, a shudder that ran through the car's metal bones, and then silence. A profound, heavy silence that was immediately swallowed by the rising howl of the wind. Rain began to fall, not gently, but in thick, angry sheets that hammered against the roof.
No, no, no.
Liam gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white, muttering as he tried the ignition again. The engine just clicked, a pathetic sound against the storm's growing symphony. Beside him, Maya stared out at the wall of trees lining the road, their branches thrashing like skeletal arms. "Where are we?" Her voice was barely a whisper. In the back, Chloe was trying to get a signal on her phone, her face illuminated by its pale, hopeless light. Ben and Noah were peering out the rear window, watching the familiar world disappear behind a curtain of rain and fog. The car, once their moving sanctuary, had become a cage. A cold dread, colder than the rain seeping through the window seals, began to settle over them. They were miles from the nearest town, stranded on a road that felt like it led to the end of the world. The storm was a living thing. Thunder cracked overhead, a sound so loud it felt like the sky was splitting apart. Lightning followed, briefly illuminating the gnarled, ancient trees that crowded the roadside, their forms twisted and menacing. Each flash revealed a landscape that seemed alien and hostile. Liam's flashlight beam, when he finally dug it out, was weak and jittery, its light dancing nervously over the dashboard. The battery was dying, just like everything else. The steady drumming of the rain was hypnotic, a relentless beat counting down to something terrible. They were 5 friends, just hours from their college dorms, now trapped in a primal darkness. Panic began to set in, a quiet, insidious guest.
Nothing, not even a flicker of a bar.
Chloe finally gave up on her phone, tossing it onto the seat with a sigh of frustration. Ben, ever the pragmatist, suggested they wait out the storm, but the car was growing colder, and the darkness outside felt predatory.
Look, over there.
It was Noah who saw it first, a faint, flickering light deep within the woods. It wasn't much, just a pinprick of warmth in the suffocating black. A house? A cabin? It was a choice between the familiar coffin of their car and the terrifying unknown of the forest. Hope, however slim, made the decision for them. The trek into the woods was a nightmare. The ground, slick with mud and tangled with unseen roots, tried to pull them down with every step. Rain plastered their hair to their faces and soaked their clothes to the bone. Liam led the way, his failing flashlight beam bouncing erratically, creating more shadows than it dispelled. The air was thick with the smell of wet earth and decaying leaves, a scent as old as the forest itself. The single light they had seen multiplied as they drew closer, resolving into the outlines of several small, dark structures. It wasn't a single cabin. It was a village, nestled in a clearing, completely hidden from the road. As they stepped into the clearing, an unnatural quiet fell. The roar of the storm seemed to mute, replaced by a low, humming silence that was somehow more unnerving. The village was a collection of about a dozen small, dilapidated houses, their wood warped and blackened by age and weather. Windows were dark, empty eyes staring out into the fog. Doors hung crookedly on rusted hinges. It was clear no one had lived here for a very long time. Yet candles flickered in some of the windows, their light soft and inviting, a stark contrast to the decay surrounding them.
Who would light candles in a place like this?
They chose the largest house, a 2-story structure that might have been a meeting hall. Its door was slightly ajar, groaning in protest as Ben pushed it open. The air that rushed out was stale and carried a strange, metallic scent, like old blood and seawater. Inside, dust lay thick on everything, covering rotting furniture and scattered debris like a funeral shroud. A long table stood in the center of the main room, set with dusty plates and tarnished silverware, as if its occupants had vanished mid-meal. The only light came from a few candles on the mantelpiece, their flames dancing and casting long, distorted shadows that writhed on the walls.
Oh, what are these?
Chloe ran her hand along the wall, then pulled it back with a small gasp. Carved into the wood were strange symbols, spirals that coiled into sharp, eye-like shapes. They were everywhere, On the walls, the floorboards, even etched into the dusty plates on the table. As they explored further, they began to hear it. Faint whispers, seeming to come from the walls themselves. They were indistinct, like the memory of voices, rising and falling with the drafts that snaked through the house. The whispers felt ancient and sorrowful, speaking of secrets the house had kept for generations. The place wasn't just empty, it was waiting. The symbols became an obsession for Maya. While the others huddled for warmth, she moved through the house, tracing the strange markings with her finger. They were unlike anything she had ever seen in her art history classes. They were not letters, not pictograms, but something more primal. Each one depicted a spiral, but at its center was a unique figure, a wave, a star, or a single weeping eye. The carvings felt deliberate, almost sacred, as if they were meant to ward something off, or perhaps to invite something in. The metallic scent was stronger near the symbols, a faint coppery tang that made the back of her throat ache with an unexplainable sadness.
Hey, check this out. There's a bunch of old journals here.
Ben, trying to rationalize their situation, found a stack of old, leather-bound journals on a dusty bookshelf. The pages were brittle, the ink faded to a rusty brown. The entries were written in a looping, frantic script, detailing the life of the village.
They called themselves the Children of the Lake. They worshipped the water, believing it to be a gateway to another realm.
There's something about a pact, a promise made to an entity that lived in the lake's dark, cold depths. It promised them eternal life, a world without sorrow, in exchange for a yearly offering, a sacrifice.
The last entry, it's dated over a century ago. It just says, "She has come for us all."
The whispers grew louder, more distinct. They were no longer just formless murmurs, but coherent words that slithered at the edge of hearing.
The water remembers, the debt is not paid.
Noah, who had been trying to barricade the door, froze. He swore he heard his own name called, a soft, feminine voice beckoning him from the floor above. He looked up at the darkened staircase, his heart pounding in his chest. The house was playing tricks on them, using their fear to isolate and divide them. Every creak of the floorboards, every rattle of a window pane, felt like a deliberate, intelligent act.
Ah, oh my God!
Chloe screamed. She had been looking in a small, cracked mirror hanging on the wall. For a split second, she hadn't seen her own reflection. Instead, a gaunt, soaking wet face had stared back, its eyes dark, empty pits. When she blinked, it was gone, and her own terrified expression returned. But the image was burned into her mind. The face was bloated, the skin pale and waterlogged, like a body that had been submerged for a long time. It was then that they all noticed the dark, wet stains on the floor, leading from the front door to the back of the house, as if someone, or something, dripping wet had walked through not long ago. The fragile unity of the group shattered. Accusations flew, born of terror.
Ben insisted we stay put, that the storm was the real enemy.
Liam argued for leaving, for taking our chances in the forest over staying in this cursed house.
It was during their heated argument that Maya, staring out a grime-covered window, saw her. A figure stood at the edge of the clearing, partially obscured by the thick, rolling fog. It was a woman, dressed in what looked like a tattered, old-fashioned gown. Her form was indistinct, shifting like smoke, but one detail was horrifically clear. Her eyes. They glowed with a soft, phosphorescent light, two pale green orbs in the suffocating darkness. The woman didn't move. She just stood there watching them. Her presence was a physical weight, a pressure that made the air in the room feel thick and hard to breathe. The whispers in the house ceased, as if holding their breath in deference to her. All sounds seemed to fade except for the frantic beating of their own hearts.
Liam slowly raised his flashlight, its weak beam cutting through the fog.
For a moment, the light illuminated her face. It was the same face Chloe had seen in the mirror, pale, gaunt, and dripping with what looked like lake water. Her expression was one of infinite, soul-crushing sorrow. Then, as quickly as she appeared, she dissolved back into the fog.
A collective, shuddering breath was released in the room. The vision had paralyzed them, cementing the horror of their situation. This wasn't just a spooky old village. It was a hunting ground.
Noah, who had been inching toward the back door, suddenly threw it open and bolted.
"I'm not dying here," he screamed, his voice swallowed by the night.
Ben yelled his name, but it was too late.
Noah vanished into the white wall of fog. A moment later, a blood-curdling scream echoed through the clearing, sharp and full of agony, before it was abruptly cut off. The silence that followed was more terrifying than the scream itself. Panic erupted. The house, which had felt like a trap, now seemed like the only possible shelter. Liam and Ben slammed the back door shut, ramming a heavy chair under the knob. Chloe was sobbing in a corner, rocking back and forth. Maya stood frozen, her eyes still fixed on the window where the woman had been. The glowing eyes were gone, but she could still feel them, a burning gaze that pierced through the walls, through the fog, seeing everything. The entity from the journal, the one who came for her offering. She hadn't come for them all. She had come for them, one by one. Desperation drove them deeper into the house. They found a trapdoor hidden beneath a ragged rug, the same spiral symbol carved into its surface. Prying it open revealed a narrow stone staircase descending into a damp, earthy cellar. It smelled of mildew and lake water. At the bottom, they found the heart of the village's secret. The cellar was a crude shrine. In the center of the room, a wide, shallow basin was filled with dark, murky water. The walls were covered in hundreds of the spiral markings, more frantic and overlapping than the ones upstairs. And on a stone altar lay another journal, its pages filled with the same desperate script.
This journal was different. It didn't just tell the story, it gave instructions.
It detailed the ritual. The villagers hadn't been trying to keep the woman out. They had been trying to complete the pact.
The entity, the Lady of the Lake, would grant them a place in her timeless, underwater kingdom, free from pain and death.
But the ritual required 5 outsiders, one for each point of a sacred star, to renew the gateway.
The villagers had failed to complete it a century ago.
The journal's final entry spoke of their failure, how the lady had taken them all in her rage, dragging their souls into the cold depths to wait for the next 5 to stumble upon their village.
A loud bang from upstairs made them all jump. The front door slammed open, then shut. Footsteps, heavy and wet, echoed on the floorboards above them. Thump, drip, thump, drip. It was inside. Chloe stifled a scream, her hand over her mouth. Ben held up a finger, his eyes wide with terror, listening as the footsteps moved slowly, deliberately, across the room above. They were being herded. The entity wasn't just a phantom, it was a hunter, and it was driving them exactly where it wanted them to go. The cellar wasn't a hiding place, it was the final stage.
Suddenly, the candles in the cellar flickered and died, plunging them into absolute blackness.
The only light was the weak, dying beam of Liam's flashlight. He swept it across the room, the beam shaking violently. The water in the basin began to ripple, though nothing had touched it. A low humming sound filled the cellar, vibrating through the stone floor. Then the whispers returned, but now they were all around them, a chorus of drowned voices rising from the basin itself.
The debt must be paid. 5 souls for the gate.
The cellar door slammed shut above them, the sound of a heavy bolt sliding into place echoing in the darkness. They were trapped. The water in the basin began to glow with the same sickly green light as the woman's eyes. From its murky depths, a hand emerged. Pale, wrinkled, and trailing weeds, it grasped the stone edge. Then another. Slowly, the woman pulled herself from the basin, her body unfolding like a terrible newborn thing. She was soaking wet, her gown clinging to her skeletal frame, her long, dark hair plastered to her face. When she lifted her head, her glowing eyes fixed on them, burning with a cold, ancient hunger. The drowned voices grew to a deafening roar, and the symbols on the walls seemed to pulse with light. Chaos.
Ben threw an old wooden crate at the entity, but it passed right through her, shattering against the stone wall.
Liam grabbed Maya's arm, pulling her toward the stairs, but the door wouldn't budge.
The woman glided toward Chloe, who was paralyzed with fear. She reached out a dripping hand, not to harm, but to touch her forehead. The moment her fingers made contact, Chloe's eyes went wide, then turned the same glowing green. A serene, empty smile spread across her face as she turned and walked calmly toward the basin, stepping into the water without a sound and disappearing beneath its surface. 1 of 5.
Liam and Ben backed away in horror, stumbling over each other.
The woman then turned her gaze to Ben. He screamed, a raw, primal sound, and scrambled up the stone steps, pounding his fists against the unyielding wood of the trapdoor. The woman simply drifted to the base of the stairs and looked up at him. His pounding slowed, then stopped. He slowly turned, his face a mask of placid acceptance, his eyes now glowing beacons. He followed Chloe into the water. 2 of 5. Now it was just Liam and Maya. The entity floated toward them, her sorrowful face promising a peaceful end to all their fear.
Liam shoved Maya behind him, shining the flashlight directly into the woman's face. The light flickered, and in that strobe-like effect, he saw it.
In the rippling water of the basin, he saw not the woman's reflection, but his own, and Maya's, and Ben's, and Chloe's, and Noah's. They were the ones who had died on the road. The car crash had been instant, a brutal end on a stormy night. This village, the whispers, the entity, it was all a purgatory, a ritual of acceptance designed by their own minds to help them cross over. The Lady of the Lake was not a monster to be feared, but a guide, a psychopomp. He finally understood.
He turned to Maya, took her hand, and walked with her toward the basin's glowing, peaceful light.
The last reflection in the water was of an empty cellar, before the light and the village faded into the fog forever.